Steve says if Jenrick spent time in Handsworth and didn't see a white face, then he's just stating a fact. And the question has to be asked, why has the resident British white population abandoned all these areas in so many cities? Well, this is a question, I think, for Dr. Rakib Ehsan, who's a good friend of the show, of course. He wrote a piece in the Telegraph yesterday about why it's not bigoted or divisive to point out that a lack of integration in this country, in some parts of the country, has taken place. It's a fact, right? I mean, look at that. 57,638 people on the migrant tracker have come here illegally on small boats since the beginning of Keir Starmer's prime ministership, right? 34,396 now since the beginning of this year alone. Where are they all going? And when they go to where they're going, how does that affect the place where they are going to? Let's find out. Rakib, a very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, very well indeed. Good piece in the Telegraph yesterday. I mean, you know, the media in the likes of Sky and the BBC and ITV were getting the knickers in a right old twist about this, saying, you know, Robert Jenrick's a racist. He's talking about how you can't see any white people in places in Britain. Well, I'm sorry. One, he's telling the truth, and two, it's his own lived experience, which they're always telling us about as a good thing. And three, it is a problem.
No, absolutely no. The Shadow Justice Secretary claimed that Handsworth was one of the worst integrated places he'd ever visited.
Yeah.
And the data that emerged from the 2021 England and Wales census very much supports that. So if you look at Handsworth, in Birmingham, there's one neighbourhood within Handsworth, Mike, when the residents were asked, what is your national identity?
Yeah.
In terms of what do you consider to be home? Where do you feel you belong to? 55% of those residents expressed a non-UK national identity, a national identity that had absolutely nothing to do with the UK. Right. And that's not necessarily a surprise, Mike, because when you look at Handsworth, there's a swathe of neighbourhoods where 1 in 5 residents either cannot speak English very well, if at all. And I think that comes to my point, that without a decent command of the English language, how could you possibly integrate yourself into mainstream civic life in Britain, interact independently with public services and engage with others who don't speak your native tongue? So I think that there are very serious problems, not just in Handsworth. I'd actually say some parts of Birmingham might be even worse integrated in some ways.
Indeed, and it's not just Birmingham. I mean, we know that there's parts of Bradford that have got problems, there's parts of Manchester, there's parts of Rochdale, Bury, an awful lot of those northern towns, particularly where, funnily enough, they had a lot of the grooming gang problems. You know, an awful lot of those constituencies, if you like, have got, you know, Pakistani heritage councillors, Pakistani heritage sort of residents, Pakistani heritage police, and it's all going horribly wrong.
No, absolutely. I think that when it comes to the remarkable cultural and demographic change that we've experienced in the UK, there's many places which have been very much affected by that, some of the places that you've mentioned there. And I think that in a way, we were having these conversations between us two 5-6 years ago, but some of these conversations were being had at the turn of the century. I remember there was the Community Cohesion Review by Professor Ted Cantle. He talked about this, you know, the existence of parallel societies, communities living side by side with very limited social contact and interaction. And some of these areas, in some ways, the situation has become even worse. That segregation has become consolidated economically, socially, and residentially. And I think that many of our politicians, they're away with the fairies, really, when they're describing us as sort of a vibrant, multicultural democracy. They don't really know what's at stake here, especially from an integration perspective.
Yeah, I think that is really the problem. But nobody seems to know what to do about it, because once you've got a community that has become so kind of self-absorbed and so kind of self-determining, if you like, you know, you can't really change it. You can't really suddenly parachute a load of white people in, can you?
No, absolutely. And I think I'd make this point that you can't have some kind of forced social engineering here in terms of making neighbourhoods mixed. I think that a big part of the, not so much the issue, but when we're looking at this phenomenon of segregated communities, there's been a great deal of white flight. But if the truth is that if certain areas have changed so much culturally and demographically, I don't necessarily blame the native population in terms of leaving that particular area. Equally, there'll be ethnic groups and religious groups. They'll favour neighbourhoods where they have specific cultural and religious amenities, for example, access to the halal butchers or a local masjid. So So I think the truth is that some of this segregation, unfortunately, is here to stay. So I think the best we can do is that how can we have a situation where communities at the moment they have limited social contact? How can you increase that contact? And in some ways, how can they possibly find common ground under very difficult circumstances?
Yeah, absolutely right. Rakib, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. You can find his piece on the Telegraph website, of course. Rakib Ehsan, social policy analyst there, talking about why Robert Jenrick was right to say what he said.